Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Peter Sprigg. I'm a resident of Montgomery County and a senior fellow for policy studies at the Family Research Council. It's important for us to understand that the way in which the issue of transgenderism is usually presented in the political arena is quite contrary to the way it is understood in the scientific community. The advocates of this bill would have you believe that those who are transgendered are discriminated against because they are women born in men's bodies or men born in women's bodies. Just as with a characteristic like race, they argue that this is a matter of inborn identity, not chosen behavior. However, the science says otherwise. It's important to remember that unlike homosexuality, with which it is often compared legally and politically, gender identity disorder remains listed as a mental illness by the American Psychiatric Association, Dr. Beyer's testimony notwithstanding. However, it is important to further note that, particularly in the case of male to female transgenders, there are two quite different phenomena at work. They have to do not with a person's identity, but with the behavior they engage in to fulfill their sexual desires. My source for this is, among others, is this book by J. Michael Bailey, The Man Who Would Be Queen, subtitled The Science of Gender Bending and Transsexualism. Bailey is no social conservative. He is a pro-homosexual scholar in human sexuality at Northwestern University, who is, if anything, controversial for his extremely liberal positions. I don't agree with everything he says, but he does offer a valuable insight into transgenderism. Bailey says that some men who wish to become women are simply homosexual men. He says of them, those who love men become women to attract them. Other men who wish to become women, however, are actually heterosexual men. That is, they are and remain sexually attracted to women. They suffer from a separate and unique disorder known as autogynephilia or transvestic fetishism. As Bailey summarizes it, those who love women become the women they love. Obviously, these are complex conditions, but what you should understand are two things. First, you're being deceived by a de-emphasis of the erotic element in the transgender condition. And second, it would be unprecedented for people to actually be offered the affirmation implicit in civil rights protections simply because they experience a mental illness. We should show compassion for these individuals, but that should manifest itself in mental health treatments to help them become comfortable with their biological sex, not in legislation which denies the reality of their condition. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes. Senator Raskin.
I guess the first question I have is, what about those cases where people were born with ambiguous genitalia, and so the biology doesn't determine it?
Well, it's important to understand that very few of the people who identify as transgender actually have what is known as an intersexed condition. These biological intersexed conditions are not present in the vast majority of people who are transgender.
Okay, but what about those who are?
Well, in those cases, I think that I think that you would have to look at the medical record and,
well, okay. So in terms of the vast majority of people that you've described who describe themselves as being caught in the wrong body, were you present for all the testimony of the moms and dads? And I know there were many more who wanted to testify, but we kept it mercifully brief just to be emblematic of the large constituency out there. What do you make of these parents who, presumably like you, resisted with all of their force until they saw that their children were telling them the truth about their lives? And so, I mean, are the parents deceived?
Well, all I know is, for instance, in Bailey's book here, he talks about some of the characteristics of adolescents with gender identity disorder, and they include having a non-intact family, parental divorce, a common theme of early adversity.
If that's all you needed, 50% of the population would be transgender.
Right. Well, But that undermines the notion, if there are differences in these sociological phenomena between those who are transgender and those who are not, it undermines the notion that it's 100% innate biological factor.
Okay. All right, so the sum and substance of your testimony is that this does not exist as a real phenomenon. This is kind of a self-delusion.
Oh, well, I mean, my belief is that if a person's biological sex is clear, then the law should treat them in accordance with their biological sex and should not protect a decision to present themselves as something other than their biological sex. They certainly, they have the freedom to do that, but we should not interfere with the rights of employers if the employer disapproves of that.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you very much. Kathleen Crank.